and welcome back. So today we're going to do a very special episode. If you have remember back, way back, probably season 1, I'd done a video on body kit and aesthetics for the 185. If you want to check it out, I'll post a link below, but I sort of go over the visual cues of the car and what makes it so great and how it can be improved. And I'd say even though I've become more educated in the school of design since then, a lot of my opinions are probably the same as they were then. So what we're going to do today is talk about a project I've been working on where I've done some renderings of the car in Adobe Illustrator, and we're going to go through that and I'll talk about that a bit. Now just to give you a heads up, this is going to be a pretty lengthy episode because I have a lot to say on the subject. So let's not waste any more time and go ahead and jump right into it.
Alright, I've got this on the screen, and I'm going to do this in sort of a slideshow presentation. And the first thing I'm going to talk about is Photoshops. I've been doing Photoshops for a long time, and it's a good solution for sort of doing mock-up. The problem is trying to find things that are always the right angle, or the right size, or resolution, and things along those lines. But with Photoshop, I can take this rolling image that I have here, which I need to do a video about this photo shoot that happened, and Photoshop it to have the Savage front lip that I have, or vector, as well as the 205 side skirts that I'm using. I changed the tint of the wheels. I had a little bit of a vinyl graphic to the bumper trim and the lip to sort of play with how this would look. The problem with Photoshop is it's so time consuming and it's so hard to get everything right and find all the pieces. And even this could use a little bit of work, but I worked with what I had. So what I did is I took my car and I re-rendered it in Adobe Illustrator. And so I had picked two primary angles to work with to get the front and rear as a way of kind of analyzing the lines on the car, making some changes to it, and just sort of being able to flesh out ideas that might not even exist. It's sort of just a quick way for me to come up with a design, and then I can take that later and see how I can flesh out in other ways. And now that I have these drawings done, maybe I will rework things in a way and do some fundraiser shirts or something. Just something for you all to sort of think on and maybe vote on down in the comments while we talk about all this. So what we're starting out here is the stock version, or at least stock enough. There's a few changes on here from the way my car actually is, and I'll go into that here in a moment. And so the primary changes from the way my car actually is one, I went ahead and drew my new wheels on there. Currently I'm running my Sportmax wheels, but I do have a set of new Koenig hypergrams that I'll be switching to. The next thing I did is I put my Euro mirrors on, which is something I will be doing in the future as well. I lowered the front end around 10 to 15 millimeters, which is what is in my plans. But that's waiting on me to make an adjustable lower ball joint, which is sort of the key to correcting the suspension geometry when I lower it further. I also added my hood pins and a tow hook. And the reason I added a tow hook, some might not be a fan of it, and I don't necessarily know if I'm going to use this tow hook. I have a few ideas in my head that I still have to put together. But if you've ever had an alltrac or Gtfour towed, you run the risk of damaging the front bumper because the OEM tow hook is so deep in there to when they actually pull on it, the cable from the tow truck or any kind of towing vehicle will rub against your bumper, it will mess up your paint. So if you push the tow hook out further and make it where it's easier to reach, that helps avoid those problems. But that's a video for another time. For now, let's go ahead and jump into the concepts. Another thing I'm doing, I'm trying to make this go a little bit faster, so I could talk about this all day. This is something I care about, and I'm passionate about design and creation, and as well as this car. But I'm kind of trying to compress as much as I can so you all don't get bored or disinterested. So what we have here are a few lip options that I actually own. So the top left, we have the Camaro lip, which I was actually in the process of trying to fit last summer. But what I found is that it's too low for my driveway. So that kind of rules it out for the time being. The lip to the right of that is the Type R lip, which you may have seen people like Gearbox running. You've also seen people like Will Henderson running earlier on in his car design. And then on the bottom left is the Savage Vector lip that I currently have. And to the right of that is the same lip, but with some application of maybe vinyl or paint to change the shape of it. So it would still be the same as on the left, but by using a dark color, whether it be graphite or black, you sort of actually affect the shape, how it blends into the car and how it sort of covers the overall appearance. So that's one way I might approach this. That is the ultimate lip I do want to run. I just don't know when I'll run it considering how my driveway is. So that might be something that's down the road or until I come up with another solution. But I do want to play with these ideas. And then here are just some more ideas I played with. The 205 front lip has been adapted in some cases as has super lips and other lips like that. And so I took the C1 lip that's meant for the 205, and just as a way to see how would this look on the car. Would this be something that we can kind of pull off and would look good, or would it just be a waste? And so it was just a little experiment with that. And then below that is the Lancer GTS Spats. Now, Will Henderson's current lip is a full lip that is meant for the Lancer or Evo X. So I'm actually more a fan of the spat look, just because it seems smaller, and since it's a similar shape, it might be an easy fix. And so I just want to do a quick render of how those might look, but they were kind of hard to capture. Everything I did was based off of reference photos and measuring, and try to make sure everything was the right scale and ratio from car to car. And that was a bit of a challenge. And these, since I really haven't had a chance to mess with in person, and the pictures I've had are from not necessarily the angles I wanted, it was more of a guesstimate. But I think they have potential there. So after I sort of settled on the lip I want to use, which in the end is the vector lip like I mentioned, I wanted to find skirt ideas that go with it. So on the top left is an idea that was actually inspired by the Veilside, I think version 1 350Z side spats. And so they sort of just cover, in a way, like the mud flap area behind the wheel and then in front of the back wheel, as a way of seeing if there was sort of a simplified kind of kit that could be applied there. And then to the right, I thought, okay, I kind of like how this flows, but the problem is we have that rail guard underneath the side of the car, and then we really need to hide that. So if we made a slight extension and combined the two into a full side skirt, I think it would be an improvement. I thought it was a good sort of mental exercise to see what I could come up with that didn't exist on the market. But I felt it was probably better to focus more on things that do currently exist. And one of those being the convertible side skirts. They're made for both the 5th gen and the 6th gen. And here you have on the bottom left, you can sort of see where I'm like, okay, if I ran those, they typically come in a black. I believe they're a textured plastic. If I used vinyl on the front lip, it could sort of unify the two. And of course, the rear lip would also be painted to match. And so that was one way to play with it. But I'm like, oh, I don't know if I like the overall shape of how it meets with the rear wheel. And so my approach was, if I built a little bit of a wing that could attach underneath it and would overlap, that could actually change the shape enough where I think it would work well. It'd help blend it into the rear lip a little bit, and it could help the design. I haven't hunted down that side skirt yet, but it's still kind of fun to play with the idea in case I did see them at the junkyard. Ultimately, what I've got already is 205 skirts. They're actually the same as the regular 6th gen. There's two variations. You have the 6th gen skirts, which are essentially the same for 205 and the 202, etc. And then there's the TRD skirts, which are a bit lower and also go up higher to the molding. For me, I'm more concerned with ground clearance, especially considering the front, and I think that going with this size will mesh better with my overall body kit design. The ones I have are currently black, and so I played with, as you can see below, the idea of if I left them black, painted the rear lip black, or used some vinyl or paint on the front lip, see how that would look, which I kind of a fan of. I don't know if I love it better, but I think I'm a fan of it, especially if you don't have the car just right by adding the body kit to it, you actually sort of narrow it and make it taller. And this sort of counteracts that effect and keeps the body height sort of the same proportions, but you're still lowering it, and it seems like it adds to it. But with the front lip settled and the side skirts more or less settled, I want to see if I can come up with a lip for the rear bumper. And so I looked through my archive of photos. I've got thousands of photos of Gtfours, some that have been made from body kits, some are custom one-offs, some are using kits from other cars. And I wanted to see what I could play with. And so there's actually many more experiments I did outside of what I'm showing you guys, but not everything was successful. So this is sort of kind of picking and choosing things just to sort of touch on and then showing where I'm kind of leaning. So on the top left here, these are actually inspired by the Red Devil wide body 185. I forget which country it's based out of, but that was something that was done. And it's sort of inspired by the way the super rear spats are for the Mk4. And I just was kind of curious how that would play on this car. And then to the right, that is actually based off of a Euro lip meant for the 6th gen Celica. A 5th gen Garage Cruise race car used that lip. And I always sort of like that. I like how the lines slope up. It has that sort of JGTC vibe with having a higher rear bumper. And I thought it meshed well. He used TRD side skirts, and so I would probably have to shave a little bit more off the top of it to keep that line flowing with the side skirts I've chosen. But I think it's a possible option. I have actually found a reseller that claims they have them. if I wanted to spend the money for it and adapt it. The bottom left is a take on the vector rear lip. You may know that as the Savage kit, and it does not look as it does what my experiment was, and I actually did this in Photoshop first to see sort of where the lines would fall. It has two options. For the front-wheel drive version, there's a dual exhaust, and then for the all-wheel drive version, there's a single exhaust on the right. And so I thought, well, I'm sort of digging this rear cutout idea where a diffuser would go or something along those lines. And so I actually cut from the dual exhaust across to each other just so you sort of get the spats effect that are connected. Now this kit doesn't jut out as much on the sides. It more of rounds the back of the body so that you sort of have the rear wheels having that bulging effect like a hot rod. And I do like it. I think there's some potential here. But of course, it's still going to be another kit that you have to order from overseas, and it's probably going to be, $500-$600 at least by the time I bought one and had it shipped over here. And that's on top of cutting it up and doing what I would want to do with it. Now, I could just leave it alone with the single exit, but I don't know if I like the lip that way. It is something to consider playing with, though, if it comes down to it. Then on the bottom right is actually what my ultimate goal would have been. And what that is based off of a one-off lip that was made for a green GTS. And unfortunately, there's only one that exists. So I had to look at several images he's had of it as inspiration to draw this, and I think that he really captured the proper flow and shape that goes with the back of the car. And I think it would really work with the side skirts. The trick is replicating it. And that's where as this project goes along, I'm going to try to attempt to do something similar, but we'll have to see if I'm successful in that goal. And then here I have a few more exercises and experimenting. In the top, this is actually inspired by the 6th Gen TRD rear spats for the Gtfour. The difference being those are a bit higher. It's the same for all 6th Gen rear spats, is that they're actually a little too low for the car. They lower the back of the bumper too low compared to the side skirts. So this design is if I had trimmed the top, adjusted the mounting points, and raised it a little bit to be even. And of course, there's a rear diffuser that would go along with it. And then on the bottom left is the same concept with the SS3 spats. So this is more along the lines of how they would fit. I had a set at one point that I experimented with. They do bolt up. Now, at the fender area, they don't fit quite right because the fenders on the 6th Gen are flat where the fenders on the 5th Gen are rounded. But it also sits a little too low on the bumper. So there is a company that makes fiberglass ones, and I think those would be a good candidate for changing the mounting position on and doing a little bit of shaving and blending to make it work better with our bumper. And that's what this actually is on the right. The right is if you raised it and then maybe use some fiberglass to connect the two to make a solid rear lip. And I think that is a good candidate, but that might require just as much work as building one from scratch. Maybe not as much, but it's still going to be a bit of work. And it actually sort of holds a similar shape to the GTS lip I showed you on the previous page. Then this is what would be the easiest option that would still look good. But the only concern being is that it also might fall in the situation where it could be too low compared to the side skirts that I'm using. I have seen it used on cars that have lower side skirts, and it blends well with those. However, I don't know if it's going to work with mine. This is sort of a last-ditch effort if I went this route. I do like it. They're fairly affordable. I mean, you can get them like less than $60 shipped half the time. It could be a good foundation for making a rear lip or a set of skirts from. And so you can see in the bottom left, I did the same thing. I connected the two to sort of make it more unified, and I think that blends a little bit better. It's still higher. It still has a raised back section. And then, of course, on the right is similar concept, but using a large rear diffuser to sort of fill that gap that would mesh in with the two. And that's really similar to the approach that Will used when he used his. I think I'd like to make mine just a little bit wider and make it blend right into the exact shape that is coming from the spats. And I think to do that, though, will require a total fabrication versus buying anything off the shelf. But this gives you an idea of different approaches for a rear lip, things that could work for an overall body kit. And while I was at it, I'm like, this is a good medium I can do some experimenting with and push some boundaries and see if there's some really cool things out there. And while I did work on some wide body ideas that I'm not going to show right now, I'm more focused on things that are possible to do. I really don't want to repaint my car. I don't want to put holes in the car. I don't want to mess anything up. And some of that stuff would be cool to do, but my car is to a point where it's not necessary. I think just doing a basic body kit and some things is the route to go. But I did play with some spoiler ideas. I do like the stock spoiler, and I'll probably keep the stock spoiler, but I want to see what my other options are. So on the top here, we have the Messiah rear wing, and I'm actually a big fan of that wing. I don't know where I would get it. And I have seen some domestic cars that have a similar wing to it, but it's something that puts itself as an option. The bottom left, I have seen on a 5th gen before. It's actually a Tier D 7th gen spoiler, and you can get those still pretty common today in different forms from fiberglass to carbon fiber. And with a body kit, it looks good. Without a body kit, I don't think it works. But with the body kit, I think it really works well in the car. And then I thought, okay, let's push some bounds. I was in talks with some other people about some different spoiler ideas. And I thought, okay, well, what if I left the stock sides, or I made a variant of the stock sides that sort of blend into that spoiler? And that might be something that would be a way of having a high wing, but still kind of pushing off the stock look. I don't know if it would look good, but it's something to sort of consider when messing with some of these different designs. And then here are a bit more modest ideas I put with the spoiler. So the top left, we have one. What if we didn't have any of the venting that's on the OEM spoiler? It was just solid all the way across and maybe a little bit more extended, almost like a ducktail. And so that was one idea with that. But I'm like, okay, I'm likely not going to be taking off my spoiler or making an entire new spoiler, but I still want to play with some ideas. And so then I took the idea on the right and said, okay, well, what if an add-on was made that blended with everything, that just went on top of the stock spoiler and turned it into a ducktail? And so there was that. Then I was looking at I think it was a 944. It had a plexiglass spoiler. And I see those on Miatas a bit. And so I thought, okay, bottom left here, what if we did a blade add-on spoiler? And it doesn't have to necessarily be plexiglass, but it would be something somewhat thin like that that could go on there and be as a way of sort of adding a little bit more downforce, but not changing the overall look too much. And I'm like, okay, well, this is kind of interesting. Let's see where this can go. And so I turned it into something that's a little bit thicker that would lay on top of the stock spoiler over here on the bottom right, and then give it a little bit more flow with the side pillars. So it'd be a way of getting a more effective spoiler that might look a little bit more sporty, extend the rear of the car a little bit to sort of balance out the overall proportions, and then have a new kind of add-on. And so that's something, I'm not going to mess with that anytime soon, but that's something down the line I may play with just to see how it looks, at least in rendering of some sort. But it's some ideas I like to throw out there, even if not for me, for the community to sort of chew on and be like, hey, I might be able to take that, but do something that might be inspired from, that goes in a whole other different direction. Since I'm on this kick of doing experimentation anyway, I thought, okay, LED taillights. I have a brand new set of taillights on my car. I'm not going to change them unless something just killer awesome had come out. But I'm like, okay, what if we did some sort of LED rear taillight that was kind of cool? And then, of course, bottom left, what if we had some rear window louvers? Back in the 350Z days, when I had one of those, there was a couple of track hatches that people would have made that reduced the footprint of the glass for a smaller window and compensated with a little bit more of a fiberglass material. And I thought, okay, what if we completely knock that out? And essentially, it would be turning the alltrac into a coupe as a way of making a lightweight hatch, having a small window, but still sort of having that side profile that sloped down. I think they even did something similar to that with the Fiero. So there's other cars out there that exist that have a similar build. And of course, I'm not in love with this, but I think for a person who's building a full race car and they're trying to save everywhere they can, this might be something to consider, especially it might give you some more options for playing with aerodynamics and things along those lines. But in the end, this is, I think, more in line of what I want to do. So on the top, we have stock, how it all started, more or less with the new wheels and lowering and stuff like that. And on the bottom, we have the Vector front lip, 205 side skirts, a modified version of the GTS lip that I talked about, and then a rear diffuser. And then for the front, same thing, just from the other angle. But here you can really see how the two compare. And then lastly, since I sort of picked out my look that I'm kind of shooting for, and of course this is all, nothing's set in stone. Of course this is sort of an evolution. This is the exploratory part of the process where I'm kind of brainstorming and looking at what I have and what I can get and seeing how it would look on the car before I go to the next step. And so here, the top is the most likely where everything is painted. I've used a little bit of vinyl or paint on the front lip to sort of affect its shape to make it blend better with the car. And then the bottom is if I wanted to incorporate my carbon fiber hood, headlight covers, and then maybe paint or do vinyl on the center grille area, just as another way of playing with the overall shape of the car. And I think that sort of modernizes it, or at least the grille portion of it, because that's sort of a trend that's going on with a little bit of the car designs now. And so here's where we're at. This is my exploration in this design process of looking what's available and what I can do and what I want to do with the car.
So now you sort of see where I come from on my theories and my approach for rendering these designs. The next stage is I'm learning a 3D modeling software. I'm going to try to model these concepts and then take those concepts, do some 3D scanning, and maybe be able to take my 3D printer to start building some prototypes. Now my printer does, I think, up to 7 inches in length. So I'll have to piece something together, but I do think I have something sufficient to possibly develop a spat concept. But that's, of course, later down the road. Hopefully I have all this sorted out by the end of the year. But for now, this is the stage I'm at, and I think I've sort of got an idea of where I want to go with it. But like always, make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll see you all next time.